try not to lose sight of who you actually need to impress with your content. I think that's easier said than done because there are always demanding stakeholders. Sometimes it's the C-suite, sometimes, it's a client. But content by committee, we all know, always is a disaster.
I'm Nicole MacLean, and this is Content Matters, created in partnership with Share Your Genius. This show is your digital partner for filtering the trends and focusing on the content that matters most, creating connection that drives results. Let's cut through the marketing chaos together.
I'm Stephanie Yoder. I'm the director of content at Rebrandly, which is a branded link shortening tool. And I've been working in content for 2 decades now, which is kind of hard to believe.
It is very hard to believe, but I'm sure that gives you tons of great experience as we talk about content and all of the fun content matters. Maybe share with us, I'd love to hear, how did you kind of get to your role? Like, what brought you into content and what's kept you in there for so long?
Yeah, so I am, what I like to call an accidental content marketer. In that,
as we all are, right?
Most of us, yeah. I didn't major in marketing. I didn't even know what content marketing was until I actually had been doing it for probably almost a decade.
Oh my gosh.
I started my career in travel writing and travel blogging.
Right.
I had a fairly popular travel blog for a while back in 2010, 2011, 2012. And I would do writing for airline magazines, but then also for B2C companies like travel insurance companies and hotel booking sites and things like that. And I would go on press trips and get paid to do that. It was all very fun, but it was terrible money. So
we did it for the experience, not the...
Exactly. Great experience.
Yeah.
Wonderful for my 20s. When I hit my 30s and had my daughter, I realized I needed something that didn't involve jetting off around the world at a moment's notice and actually involved a steady income. So from there, I transitioned to ghostwriting. And I actually wrote probably about a dozen different books on all sorts of subjects, mostly for C-suite and for academics, which was a really good training in thought leadership and interviewing SMEs and a lot of different things. So from there, a friend of a friend referred me to their content marketing agency, and I got into agency work and did just about every role from writer to editor to strategist to ultimately at my last agency, I was director of client services. And then when I got laid off from that job, I decided to finally take the party in-house. So here I am.
That's amazing. Okay, so many questions. First, best trip, and maybe travel tip.
Oh boy. So my biggest travel tip is not to be afraid to travel solo. I used to do a lot of solo travel in my 20s, and I still love every chance I get to do it, although mostly now I travel with my husband and our 8-year-old daughter. But I think waiting for someone to go with you is a huge mistake because most of the world is very safe and very exciting, and there's just so much to do.
That's a really good one because most people don't want to do that.
I don't know, but my favorite countries to travel to are Mexico, Italy, which I actually lived in Italy for a couple of years, which was wonderful.
Wow.
And Vietnam was really wonderful, too. I mean, I love everywhere I've been.
That's awesome. Maybe we'll do a bonus episode on all those things. But I was just curious, when you get to travel that much, I'm sure you've experienced some really, really cool things. The other thing you mentioned is that kind of agency, like ghostwriting and then agency and then going in-house. What's been the biggest shift, do you think, of being in that agency role versus an in-house role?
It's been a really interesting change. When you're in an agency, you're very focused on content creation and making the client happy. And when you are in-house, there are so many other stakeholders that you need to be accountable to. It's not just the head of marketing, it's also the head of product and the CEO, and, the tech team has launches that they need to support on. And there's just so many more moving parts that I had to learn about how they all worked together because I had been so laser focused on creating content that would make my client happy.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And we this comes up on our show all the time. Marketing's at the epicenter of a lot of things. You know, you mentioned 4 or 5 maybe different departments in that: product, sales, C-suite, account management, and client success. Do you feel like it's your job as a content marketer to kind of figure out what everyone else needs, or like even on a marketing team? And I'm sure this is dependent on size. You know, if you're a small team, you probably all have to wear a bit of this hat. But where do you think the ownership of kind of aligning that sits? Like, is it with you? Is it with a marketing leader? Is it the responsibility of product to like think about marketing and try to support? You know, where have you seen that be the most successful?
That's a great question. So I have a very small marketing team. Up until recently, it was just the VP of marketing and myself. And now we have a growth marketer as well.
Nice.
And I was the first content marketing hire for the company. So what I found is most people in the company didn't really have a great idea of what a content marketer actually does. So there was a lot of upfront education that had to happen that was on me. So they understood what I was responsible for, how I could help them, but also that I have larger goals and I can't just drop everything to review an email sequence or, you know, copy edit a page. You know, I need to fit things into my workflow as well. I'm not just like sitting there waiting for work.
Yep. The plight of every content marketer is, I'm just waiting to edit your emails.
So the challenge for me, I think, has been figuring out how to work with those different stakeholders and developing the system. And I do think that is on me because they don't know how necessarily to work with content or how I like to be worked with. So.
Well, that's a really good point too, because not every content marketer works the same or collaborates the same. So I think that education, not just on what the role is, but then how you can best support them and vice versa, I do think is really critical. Is there anything now that you've been in-house that if you were to go back to your agency self, or you were to give a maybe piece of advice to the agency to be like, oh, if you think of this, or if you can unlock understanding these pieces, like you probably would be more successful as an agency partner?
Absolutely. It's so funny. I've been thinking about this a lot over the past 8 months since I started this role, that I would be so much better at my old agency job now that I have been in-house and like have more context on how things work. I think that as an account manager, like it can be very frustrating when you really just want to create the best piece of content, but you're not getting clear feedback, or you're getting conflicting feedback, or you revise something one way and then like someone else comes in and you have to change it an entirely different way. And I think I have a lot more insight now into the various forces that are at play when it comes to content creation, and like that there are a lot of stakeholders that need to be accounted for and like massaged to like actually make things happen. And, you know, there are roadblocks that your point of contact may have no control over. So I think a bit of empathy for that now that I didn't have before. And then I think the other piece of it is just understanding that when you're in an agency, like you spend all of your time thinking about your clients, but then when you are in-house, you actually spend very little time thinking about your agency. And probably the less time you're thinking about your agency, the better.
Right.
Because that means things are working smoothly and you don't have to be like heavily involved. So that was a bit of an interesting perspective shift for me. It's like if you can like create a seamless experience for your clients so that they aren't worried about what you're doing and they're just happy with the deliverables, that's really the key.
Well, it's the classic thinking how to resource a team. So obviously you were brought in at Rebrandly. You are now spending 100% of your time on the Rebrandly brand. And there is something that gets unlocked. And of course, everyone wants or wishes that their agency was like as committed as an in-house person would be. But that agency has tens to hundreds of clients
probably that you need to juggle and
exactly. And the fact that you get to see how so many different clients are approaching problems, you know, let's use, we're talking about content. So if you're looking at content challenges, you now have someone that's looking how 20 to 30 different clients are figuring out how to work internally and get good stakeholder feedback and not have conflicting revisions. And so that in theory, you're able to maybe bring some deeper level of expertise or just maybe challenge some perspectives based on that. But it's kind of that pro con. Where are you in your journey as a company? Do you really need that in-house expertise? So like that's just always the question of how do you resource a team that's scalable and still delivers results?
Yeah. And I do agree. I think that in a way that is my superpower is that I have been exposed to so many different brands and their content strategies, and also just working with so many different kinds of people. I'm like, I keep telling people in house, I'm like, negative feedback is not going to faze me. Like I have had clients who have screamed at me on calls, like,
Yep.
I have a thick skin.
Yeah, we could probably go down such a rabbit hole on feedback. I do feel like creatives, I mean, there are some creatives that are very bad at taking feedback, but on the whole, I would say it is probably the biggest superpower, whether it's design or content, just the amount of feedback and the ability to separate the personal with I just want to do good work. And if that's your opinion, like that's okay, but I'm going to take it the most constructive way possible.
And I think an underrated skill is also being able to educate people on how you like to receive feedback and what sort of feedback is helpful for you. And I learned that a lot in agency work, because if a client sends something back and they're just like, I hate this. Okay, why? How?
Fair,
What would you
yep.
like to be different? But like being able to get on the call and ask those questions like, what did you think about this part? What do you think about the tone? Like, let me read you this sentence. Tell me how you would change it. And like being able to drill down on that is so important to reaching like powerful content people actually like.
Well, 100%. And being able to not just accept like, this is crap content. Okay, well, is it actually crap content? Being able to challenge or educate without coming across as defensive is a very hard thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes it's like, well, you asked for this, but your feedback is something else. Like, can we bridge the gap here? And it, not making it sound like you're passing the buck or being like, well, you didn't ask for that in the brief, so this is really your fault,
Yep, exactly. Just really streamlining that process.
Yeah, absolutely. So you are marketing to marketers with rebranded links. Is that really the...
Yeah, marketing to marketers, which always feels like a little bit of a cheat code. It's like, okay, I know who these people are.
Yes, but we also have a very high bar because we have to do it.
You can't bullshit marketers because we write the bullshit, so we know.
Exactly. I can't sneak a little, oh, you filled out this content form. Obviously you want to buy now. It's just not quite how it works. But how do you approach content to point of marketers who typically are probably more sophisticated if they're looking to use a branded relink? Like, you probably have a pretty good sense of, you're not talking to a layman. You're talking to someone who kind of knows what they're doing. Like, how do you approach a content strategy?
Yeah, well, the nice thing about marketers is they do read a lot, and they're always looking for ways to be more efficient and improve their craft. The thing about marketers is, like, universally, like, we're all so busy and, like, have an endless to-do list of things that we can't get to, and we all need help. So I think if you can tap into that and explain, like, okay, well, branded links are going to help you because they're more professional, they get higher clicks than generic ones, they're more trusted, they're less likely to be blocked by social media, and like if you can really hit those pain points, then that's really effective, I think. The other thing that is really important to me is just empathetic writing. I actually just wrote a LinkedIn post about this, but it's like when you go to a party, like a networking party or something, and you meet someone and they immediately start pitching you on something, it's really off-putting. Like, you want to get to know someone first and like know that they actually understand you and your needs and your pain points before you're interested in talking about what they have to offer. So I think approaching content from that is like, let me help you. Also, by the way, like, this could help you more.
Well, and I think as marketers too, like, we are under such scrutiny because we touch revenue, but it's not as direct as sales or maybe account management. And we do wear so many hats that I don't think everyone always understands. So then when you are just trying to educate or grow or find something that's just going to kind of give you that extra thing to then I always kind of feel bad or I'm hesitant too because I'm like, I really want this information, but I don't want to have to be in a position to say no to a sales pitch to be like, this is interesting. And yeah, I'd love to do it. There's no way I'm going to have budget for this. Or there's no way that this is what like I can go stake my reputation to try to go get budget for in this moment. But I'm really interested. I'm a fan. I might share. I might talk to other people. But then if you get that sales pitch, you might lose that kind of word of mouth or just like the goodwill that you can buy, which is good, genuine educational content.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot to be said for long-term relationship building. And it's a little weird for us because we are a product-led growth company and like we have a free account. So there's not a lot of effort to like sign up and use it. So like we do want to encourage people to try it. But at the same time, if you can just be that helpful person who remains front of mind so that when people decide they do need your product, they think of you as opposed to your competitors, like that's really powerful too.
Yeah, absolutely. As a sales and marketing leader, I'm always interested to hear about a team's tech stack. At Composely, we use Apollo with HubSpot to fuel our outbound outreach. My team loves it. It consistently provides accurate contact information and is incredibly user-friendly. If you're thinking about changing your data provider or just want to hear more about our experience, connect with me on LinkedIn or check out the link in the show notes of this episode. Improve your inbound, increase conversion, and keep your marketing database squeaky clean with Apollo. Where do you think that line is of empathy? Is it leading with client stories? Is it leading with thought leadership? A co-founder book, perhaps? Where are those things? Yeah.
Yeah, it can be. I also think you can do, pretty tactical SEO-based content that leads with empathy. And I think it just comes from truly understanding the pain points of your audience and then creating content that answers those questions that may or may not include your product. If it does, I think Hotjar is a company that has always done this really well. And I actually worked on their content account when I was just getting into B2B SaaS. And it taught me a lot about, they just teach people how to solve problems, but also you can use their tool to do it and it'll be easy. So I think that in a sense, that is also empathetic. Yeah. What I think is not empathetic is when you just create a listicle of best tools and yours is at the top. That is just shoving yourself on people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What is there a big challenge or, especially I think about AI or I think about how people are consuming content, that you or your team is kind of trying to think through right now and trying to solve?
Yeah, I mean, AI is obviously the big one. And the fact that, search traffic is declining in favor of these bespoke LLM searches and how do you account for that and how do you make sure your brand shows up? And that's something we've been discussing a lot and I've been doing a lot of research on. And it's hard because the answer right now is nobody really knows. We have some inklings of what makes things show up in LLMs, but we don't entirely know. And so I think when that is the case, my inclination is to keep doing what's working and then try little things. So I was reading today that LLMs, they really like it if you show up in other places, organically, so on Reddit or on G2. So then the conversation is okay, well, how can we increase the conversation about ourselves in those places in a way that reads organically? And I don't know the answer to that yet, but I'm going to figure it out.
I'm going to go on a bit of a soapbox. So let me you guys can speed through it if you want to, but I've just been talking to so many people this week in particular, and I get it. I'm a marketer. What's the saying? Hate the game, not the player. But I feel there's so much out there right now that's either SEO is dead or I know the thing that's going to make you have AI search success and this is what you need to do. And look at this data that I've gotten. And I'm maybe if you've been really ahead of it, you have 3 months worth of data, but that's not enough of a trend to say you've unlocked AI search. And it just feels there's a lot of people kind of fear mongering or trying to go and get the clickbaity headline to sell you something because people don't know yet. And it's can we just be honest that this is evolving very quickly? It feels every other month, Google or the GPTs are changing kind of what shows up and like what they say they want. And I think it really just goes back to like tried and true principles of like write good content, be a human. You can use AI in content, but like it needs to be done in a like smart, efficient way. And you need to have good brand reputation. And like if you do those three things, it kind of is the tried and true. And it just feels like a lot of people are trying to like scam like quick win methodologies or like data that just isn't real. And I don't know, it's just
100%.
frustrating.
I agree. I think that's very true. And then I think on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have a lot of people who are so overwhelmed by it all and like kind of scared of it all that they're just sticking their heads in the sand. And like, that's not the strategy either. Yeah. Because it is coming and it is going to change how we do things. And we have to accept that and not necessarily embrace it, but, you know, be open.
Yeah, well, and it just goes back to, I mean, I just feel like search has always, and like you, I mean, travel blogging is like the original, I feel like, where SEO really kind of got its legs. I mean, you've seen it through a lot of iterations, but everyone's always looked for like the quick way of doing it, of like, okay, well, let's just keyword stuff, or like, let's buy a bunch of backlinks and do comments. And there's always been black hat tactics. And at the end of the day, it's just always been write good content, have a good brand, create trust and authority in the market. And it never really has switched away from like those best practices. I mean, maybe there's been some like, okay, answer it up front and then have like a lot of length that gives more context to it, or like, nope, do really short articles. I mean, some of that has shifted, but at the end of the day, if it's good content, you really should withstand a good amount of these changes.
Yeah. And I feel like when there is this sort of uncertainty, that leaning back on those things that you know are true, the things you just mentioned, creating good content, connecting with people, like that's how you win, because that's not going to change. People are always going to want that stuff.
We're finding, curious if you've experimented or seen this, but you know, this is the benefit of having multiple clients and kind of seeing what's working and what's not, that it's not that you can't have a personality in like SEO blogs or you can't have a really strong brand voice, but the LLMs in particular sometimes struggle with a really voicey piece to like understand what it's about or to synthesize it. And so finding those moments too of saying like, okay, well, maybe for blog content, it can still be empathetic. It can still like the approach is educational and informative, and that is great. But maybe that's not where you need to have like the most unique tone of voice so that it is easier for LLMs to pick up on the context of it. But then on a conversion page or your homepage or a product page, like that's where your personality or your social media accounts, like just nuancing those channels.
Yeah, absolutely.
And still
and I
having
think this is an area where it is just going to be a lot of trial and error too. And what the LLMs want may evolve over time as well, because they are also getting smarter.
Yes, maybe
they're getting stupider too. I also think about like all of the crappy content that's being generated with AI, and then the LLMs feeding off of that crappy content. And I do think there is an opportunity in that to stand out by, you know, being on top of the garbage heap, which maybe is not a selling tagline, but
you know what? I like it. We might do if you're going to have crap content, be the best crap content.
Be the best crap content.
Just kidding. No, we're not dumpster content. We are good quality content that people actually read.
Like, as people are using LLMs to create content, like one of the first things I did when I got to Rebrandly was create guidelines on how we would use LLMs in our content creation process, because it's not realistic to say no AI, and it's not smart really anyways, because it can help you be a lot more productive and prolific, but you can't just be like generating articles and posting them online because they're going to be terrible.
How did you approach that? You know, knowing that it does evolve so quickly and things are changing, like how did you go about creating guidelines that were scalable but also gave some flexibility for how to use AI in content?
Yeah, so the guidelines are really just for me and my one freelance writer and my one social media person. But
Hey, I bet that's better than what most people have for like a team of 20. So,
yeah,
you know,
but I
I
did
think it'll
send
be
it out
helpful.
to the whole org too, just for so they could maybe follow along. But I think basically we don't create long form content wholesale from AI. We use AI for brainstorming. We use it to, create the shitty first drafts of things, but like nothing is getting generated and then published anywhere. And I think that's kind of like the golden rule of it. But then there's other things that like people who aren't super versed in AI don't know, like the fact that AI will hallucinate statistics and things like that. So we have guidelines around not doing our research via AI and double checking any stats that you like have run through AI, things like that. Just like
It's a good call out.
using the tools responsibly, but then also copious editing and quality control.
Do you have any guidelines or guardrails on what you feed it? Like any of like the source material?
That is an interesting question. I mean, obviously, we want to be careful about anything that's proprietary or internal client information and things like that. Other than that, I don't think we have any real guidelines on that.
I feel like there's been a bit of a shift I've noticed is like 6-9 months ago, it was, okay, it's not up to date on the internet. Giving it a website is maybe not the best thing. Like give it a PDF or give it some sort of source material and use that. And now lately I've been hearing it's not great, especially if you have a lot of source material. It isn't great at that, and it's better if you just give it the website and let it.
Oh, interesting.
So it almost feels like
on the tool too.
Yeah, it feels like it's pendulum swung a little bit of like it was not good at websites, so then it got really good at it, and it'll probably level out. But the source material piece is one of the things I've been trying to think through of like how much data. Like again, there's a sweet spot of how much you give it versus too much, and then it freaks out. And
Right, and I think like understanding how to prompt AI in a way that you're actually going to get, it's garbage in, garbage out, quality in, hopefully quality out. And that's a skill that I think all writers and marketers probably are going to have to really learn.
Yeah. You mentioned, this is kind of going back, but you mentioned really understanding like the pain points, and you rattled off ones that I'm sure we all can have with links. You clearly have a really good understanding of it, and that's what you're writing the content towards. How do you think about making sure the rest of the organization's really aligned with those pain points and feel confident in talking about them?
That's a great question. That's something we've been working on a bit lately. Rebrandly is interesting because it's actually been around for 10 years, but it was only in the past couple of years that like the marketing arm has gotten strong and that we've like been building up those muscles.
Classic product led.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think that is a challenge for us, like making sure that the sales team has access to the same materials, and even like the engineers and stuff, if they go to a conference or something, like they're prepared to speak about Rebrandly and our value proposition. And, we do some internal education. I try to share the things we're writing for people to read. We're small, we're only 25 people, so that helps.
Yeah, it does. And are you remote?
We are global remote. So all of the engineers are over in Europe, and a lot of the marketing team, we're all in the US. So that's an interesting challenge as well.
Yep. It's a fun but interesting challenge. Yeah, we are also quite remote, which again, like such an opportunity to work with people you would never have the ability to work with. But sometimes there's I wish I could just walk to your desk and talk to you about this, or like grab a whiteboard and...
There's interesting time zone things, My boss is on the West Coast. All of the designers are in Spain and Italy. So it's like, okay, when are we going to have meetings?
Yep. It's always the fun game of time zone hopscotch or jigsaw puzzle. All right. So this has been great. As a wrap up, any advice that you'd share with marketers, especially right now when it feels like we're heading back into that do more with less mentality that maybe we got a bit of a reprieve, but we might be heading back into?
Yes. So my advice that I was thinking about is try not to lose sight of who you actually need to impress with your content. I think that's easier said than done because there are always demanding stakeholders. Sometimes it's the C-suite, sometimes, it's a client. But content by committee, we all know, always is a disaster. So just like working really hard to clarify who you're writing content for and what they actually need from you and want from you, I think is going to go such a long way, especially right now.
That is so good. One, because it's great alliteration, the content by committee. But yeah, we do fall into that. And I mean, even our content creator, Franny, as people who listen to the show know, and kind of having those conversations of, yes, we want to take risks, but then it's like, okay, we're cool with the risk, but then someone else sees it. Are they cool with the risk? And over time, it just kind of becomes less and less interesting or less and less with a strong point of view, just because everyone kind of gets in. And I think that alignment, probably like, who is your ICP? What are we trying to accomplish with this? Does this relate to a company goal? And who is that final stakeholder? And like, are they bought in on the vision? That's a really good reminder.
Yeah, and I think it can be exhausting to always have to go to bat for your content, but like being able to draw it back to like, is this actually going to help us achieve our goals? Well, no, it's not if nobody's going to read it because it's like a Frankenstein mess. I think that's
powerful. We probably all know the ebooks and the we all have that Frankenstein that we maybe want to keep in the closet. But yeah, I think that is a great reminder. And to point, we don't have the luxury of putting out content that isn't going to get read or isn't going to move the needle. And so maybe even doing less that really hits the mark, that has the buy-in, probably is good advice right now.
Yeah, and I think like with AI, there is that pressure now to do more quantity versus quality. But if you don't have a plan for that quantity to make it work, then it's just busy work.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Content Matters, created in partnership with Share Your Genius. If you like the show, please subscribe, leave a review, and share with a friend. Otherwise, you can find all the resources you need to stay connected with us in the show notes. Till next time.